Jazzcast Pros.
What would you do if you discovered that your child could not hear you? Today, I am joined by Samantha Taylor, founder of Olive Speech Therapy and Empowered Parent Network, a mother to a deaf son and a son with ADHD. She's a passionate speech language pathologist and advocate with over 17 years of experience. Let's dive in and hear how she pivoted from what she thought would be a career in journalism to creating her own business. Welcome to Healing Her Within, where inner healing meets unstoppable power. This podcast is for women ready to stop shrinking, heal their inner child, and rise into their true selves. I'm your host, Maryann Rivera, and here we have real conversations about healing, growth, and reclaiming your voice. You were never broken, you were becoming. So take a breath, settle in, and let's begin from the inside out. So tell us, Samantha, so your journey into speech language pathology began through your son's diagnosis. So how did that moment transform not just your career path, but also your identity as a mother?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always like to say my son was my undergrad surprise. I was a junior in my undergraduate program when I found out I was pregnant. So that in and of itself was a whirlwind. So I graduated with my degree in journalism, had a beautiful baby boy. But when he was 4 months old, we found out that he is profoundly deaf. And to me at that time, I can't even begin to explain how devastated I felt. And looking back on it, like, oh, he's thriving, he's doing incredibly well. But in that moment, he was the first deaf person I'd ever met. So not only was I a baby myself, but I'm expected to raise this baby and also figure out this diagnosis. So for me, it really was a make it or break it moment, not only as a mom, but as a human being, because I realized I have to figure this out for my mental health, but also to raise this incredible human that I now have in front of me.
That's amazing. And so you talked about, journalism. So talk a little bit about that dream, going from that to what you're doing today.
Yep. So for all of my millennial girls out there, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days was my ultimate favorite dream. I wanted to be Andy. And for those of you who don't know that movie, she was a magazine editor in New York City. So I had it in my heart of hearts that that was what I was going to do. I was going through undergrad during early to mid 2000s, and that field was pivoting, we'll say.
Right.
So not only that it was pivoting, but then also with my son, I was like, oh gosh, I need to figure this out. So I really took a year to figure out who I was as a person, who I was as a mom, and who I wanted to be. With my son, he started receiving speech therapy, which I had never heard of. But I was like, you get paid to play with kids? Like, I need to know more about this. And thankfully, I am that type of person that once I get my head set on something, I'm going to do it. So I applied and was accepted. And really, that is what set the trajectory for the life I live now, was that one decision.
I love that. I love that. So, as both a parent of a deaf child and a speech therapist, how has that dual perspective shaped how you support families in your practice?
Yeah, wonderful question. So for me, I started as a parent first. And I think that's a really important distinction because many of those in the field, they start as a professional first and then they start their families. And me starting out as a mom first, I knew what it was like to attend those meetings, those annual meetings that you have with the school district. And I knew what it felt like to be terrified. I knew what it was like to sit in my car and cry and feel overwhelmed and feel stupid, to be completely honest. So being the professional, I bring that experience with me so that I can empathize with those parents. I know what it's like to be in their position, especially in those early meetings. I can provide that empathy and that compassion, knowing that it is really scary. And there's a lot of professionals that can be really intimidating. So I really focus on providing a safe space for these parents to say, you know what, sometimes this kind of sucks and that's okay. We'll figure this out together.
Yeah. So before we dive a little bit more into what you're currently doing, what was that pivoting like from the journalism to what you're doing now? Because it was, a completely different calling. How did you handle that?
I'd like to say with grace, but I think that might be a lie. It was a lot of trial by fire, really
Mm,
just surviving in those early years. Anyone who has a toddler knows how chaotic that can
right.
be. So really, it was keeping my eye on what I ultimately wanted in life, because the day to day, there were so many days where I just wanted to give up because I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I didn't know exactly how I was going to get to where I wanted to be. So it really was just keeping my eye on where I wanted to end up, because the day to day was so difficult and so
Mhm.
full of unknowns.
Yeah. What were some of those unknowns and how did you work through them?
Another great question. So, I guess to give a little more context to the situation, so I was married to my son's father when I was 5 months pregnant, which in and of itself was not overly welcomed by families, because I was very pregnant at our wedding, but also the fact that we were so young. We had a child with a unique need.
Yeah.
We didn't make it. We ended up getting a divorce when my son was a year old. So that was one of those unknowns that I'm kind of referencing. I didn't know how I was even going to support myself. I didn't know how I was going to support my child. I didn't know how I was going to go to school. I didn't know how to do any of those things. So that was one of those things where I just kind of had to figure it out. And I always love to give credit to Marie Forleo, because she is like the creator of my favorite mantra: everything is figure outable.
Yeah.
And at that time, I didn't have those words, but in my heart of
Mhm.
hearts, I knew, like, we're going to figure this out, because
Right.
if we don't,
Yeah.
then we're in trouble. So,
Yeah. So you talked about, the relationship, being pregnant and all of that. You weren't fully supported by your family. So, being a newlywed, being pregnant, how did you deal with that? What was some of those things that you had to heal through? And what was some of the healing modalities that you perhaps engaged in to heal?
yeah. So I love to call myself a recovering people pleaser. So
Mm,
that was when I really, really had to acknowledge that and do something
yeah.
about it, because I was doing a lot of things that were upsetting to people that really had no say in my life. Having my son is really where a lot of that change happened for me,
Mm,
because he is someone who he marches to his own beat.
yeah.
He doesn't care what other people think, and he is so authentically him. So, really watching him model that and having to advocate for him, I got really good at acknowledging that boundaries needed to be set. I got really acknowledging that my voice deserved to be heard too, that it was okay for me to have opinions that differed from other people, that it was okay for me to say no. Like,
Yeah.
it was wild, but well into my adult years, I didn't realize I could say no. So, really simple, appearingly simple shifts needed to happen, but those simple shifts were game changers. So, again, really setting those boundaries, learning that you can say no, learning that I mattered as a human being, and really being able to protect my energy were huge
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah. And I'm a huge believer of boundaries, but sometimes we make it sound a little easier, than the process actually is. So, you have your boundaries, but they probably weren't easily accepted, by family members. So how did you really work through that to the point that it was okay, I'm no longer people pleasing. It's not about you, it's about me, it's about my son. How did you deal with that?
So we'll say that's a work in progress. So it still comes up. I'm huge on progress over perfection. So really
Love
trying to
that.
move that needle one interaction at a time. But really, it came down to realizing I'm not responsible for how other people perceive things or how they respond or how they react. What I'm responsible is for how I deliver the message for
Right.
sure. And I deliver it with dignity and grace. But at the end of the day, that's not my responsibility. And also keeping in mind that how people respond, that's their own baggage. We all filter our experiences, our responses through what we've been through. So really keeping in mind that that wasn't mine to carry anymore.
Yeah, I love that. That is so true because sometimes we can get lost in that because that
Mhm.
inner critic, that people pleasing can still try to, creep up and make excuses or you allow for it. I'm like, okay, I understand. We'll do it this time. But again, that's not keeping your boundaries.
Exactly. And
Yeah,
another big thing too, and I know Mel Robbins wrote a beautiful book on it recently, is let them. Let
yeah,
them be mad. It's
right.
okay. Like
Yeah,
let them be upset. That's
correct.
totally fine.
Yeah, I love that. So you took another leap of faith by starting your own practice. So what inner growth or healing had to happen for you to step into entrepreneurship? What was that journey like?
Yeah. So I am the type of person, I jump 2 feet into everything I do and I figure it out on my way down, which has been great in some regards, but actually has taught me quite a bit about myself. So the leap into entrepreneurship really wasn't that hard because I am a huge dreamer. I
Mhm.
love to have big ideas and try new things. What was hard for me is slowing myself down to
Mm,
figure out the steps, to figure out what I was doing, to I now have employees, so making sure I have a sustainable business that can
yeah,
continue to support them. So for me, I had to really work on my growth from the transition of idea into a sustainable business. And it was kind of maturing and calling myself out on some of the patterns I had, like the impulsivity or the wanting to abandon things when they weren't perfect, because not only was I a people pleaser, but also a perfectionist. So a great, a great
yeah,
duo. So really allowing myself to ask for help, to make mistakes, to slow down, to acknowledge when I didn't know something really had to happen for this business to turn into what it is today.
yeah. How were you able to slow down enough to be able to make progress, but not to allow that inner critic again to step in and say, hey, you're being too lazy. Like, what are we doing here? And abandon the dream.
Yeah. So my husband, I always say I'm the dreamer and he's the grounder. So I think it's really important to have solid support, knowing who your people are. So one of the things I teach is kind of having your posse, right? So we have like our cheerleader, we have our like our grounder, our comfort, whatever it may be. And for me, I need to make sure I have someone that helps ground me to slow me down. But also, I have become a huge block scheduler. So more of a tangible tactical thing. If it doesn't fit in the schedule, it doesn't touch it. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to be really strict with boundaries in terms of my schedule, and that has really forced me to slow down because I have ideas for days. So it's like we'll jot those down, we'll get to them when it makes sense, but right now this is what I'm focusing on. So
I
yeah,
love that.
I'd say block scheduling has been my best friend.
I love that. So you talked about earlier about creating a safe space for your families. What does that look like in practice and why do you feel that's so important?
Yeah. So for me, I really want my families to feel supported and emotionally safe, knowing that I have their back, because I always say schools and professionals, I genuinely believe they have the best interest at heart, but sometimes it's a little misguided or it might miss the mark or it might just be filtered through their lens. So a lot of times families can feel kind of swept to the side or not cared about or not supported. So I always want my parents to know that they have me in their corner and that I will fiercely advocate for them in any way that they might need. And so what that might look like is me attending meetings, but also what I care most about is equipping them with the tools they need to be fierce advocates for themselves and for their children. So just really being that space where they feel heard, so that they know that they matter, that their concerns matter, they're not alone, that they are supported.
Yeah. So now let's pivot just a tiny bit because we've talked about, your practice and your business and entrepreneurship. What exactly is your business and how do you help others?
Yeah. So kind of twofold. My main business is Olive Speech Therapy. It's a speech therapy clinic in the Victor area, but we serve families all across Ontario, Monroe, and Orleans County. And that has been really wonderful for that direct support for our children and what have you. And I absolutely love that. And we have a great team. But what I was noticing again and again is that not only do our kids need support, our parents need support
Yeah.
too. So out of that came the Empowered Parent Network. And that is where I really work with parents to help them not only advocate for their children in their meetings, obviously that's very important, but also support them and raise their confidence in who they are as an individual and as a parent. Because none of us exist in silos. We're not just one thing. Like,
Right.
I'm a mom, I'm a entrepreneur, I'm a daughter, I'm a friend, as I'm sure you are. So
Yeah.
we wear all of these hats and we have to make sure that we take care of all of us and not just one part of us.
Yeah, I love that. So you mentioned all these different hats that you wear. So before I ask you my next question, self-care. How do you prioritize your mental health, your well-being? How do you take care of you?
Yeah, so that is something, again, another work in progress. But for me, I've gotten really intentional with, I know earlier I talked about boundaries with other people, but I've had to get really intentional about my boundaries with myself and
Mm,
with my own schedule. So I dedicate blocks of time throughout my week that are only for me. I'm not allowed to schedule anything in them except for self-care items. So that might be lunch with a friend, that might be a massage, that might be a walk around the neighborhood or reading a book, but those are my non-negotiable times that no one or nothing can touch outside of obviously emergency or what
right.
have you. But for the most part, I have had to really force myself to value self-care because many of us, especially women, we go, 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 and then we reach burnout, but we can't stop. So then we're just kind of spiraling, and that's not helpful for anyone because then it impacts our ability to feel like we're nailing it as a mom, as a wife, as a friend, as an individual. So I think self-care is so important. So kind of forcing yourself to do the
Yeah.
things, figuring out what those things are that you need.
Yeah, that's so true. And I love the fact that you said figuring it out because sometimes we overthink it and we might not know where to begin. And I just say, just try different things until that one thing clicks that you enjoy doing and just add more of that to your calendar.
Yep. Yeah, and that's such a good reminder too because there's so many shoulds I feel like we have in life. So it's like I should do this. This is what
Yeah.
self-care is supposed to look like, but it might not rejuvenate us. It might not be the thing we need. So I love just trying different things. For me this year, I as an SLP, I love a good goal. So I made myself a treatment plan. I have goals with objectives, and one of them is like that self-care piece. So my goal is to find a new hobby. So my challenge for 2026 is every month I'm trying something new. I'm trying
Mhm.
rock climbing. I'm trying crocheting. Oh goodness. I tried to figure out my list for the year and I'm only up to like two or three of them, but I'm trying traveling. So finding those things that
Yeah.
I might not know
Right.
bring me peace and joy yet. So yeah.
Until you try it. I
Yep.
love that.
Exactly.
I love that. So, looking back on your journey from fear to uncertainty to purpose and impact, what would you say to another mother who is at the very beginning of a similar path?
I would tell her, you've got this. No one has it figured out. That mom that looks super put together, there's days that she questions herself too. So there's no perfect. Perfect doesn't exist. And all that you can do is try to be the best version of you, continue to learn, continue to grow, and keep in mind that this little person who is looking at you loves you with all of their being, and that there are days where it's really, really hard, and it's okay to acknowledge that. It's okay to cry. It's okay to say this sucks sometimes, but at the end of the day, you just really have to make sure that you take care of yourself too.
That's very true. And for parents who are just starting to notice either a speech or hearing concerns in their child, what are the first steps that you feel they should take and what signs should not be ignored?
Yeah. I am not a proponent of wait and see. So when it comes to speech, I'm a huge proponent of just getting baseline. So if you have any sort of indication of concerns or anything that you're uncertain about, I'm a huge proponent of talking to a professional, having someone lay eyes on your kiddo to see like, oh, maybe these aren't concerned, but then you at least have started that conversation. You at least know what to look for. Maybe it's an evaluation. So then you again have a baseline to compare against in 6 months, 12 months from here. Pediatricians, one of my best friends is a pediatrician. I love her, but they don't know the specialties. They don't know speech. They don't know occupational therapy. They really only have a cursory view of those areas. So, well meaningly, they may tell parents it's okay to wait and see. And what I have seen in my practice is a lot of times then we're not reaching the child till they're 3, 4, 5, and then we're expecting them to go into a school system and they're not quite prepared for it, when a lot of these things could have been addressed when they're 1, 2, 3 years old. So if you are a parent and you have any sorts of concerns, if your child is under 3, you can reach out to Monroe County Early Intervention. They can help you with the free services, with the evaluation and speech therapy services, also occupational physical therapy, all of those things. If your child's between 3 and 5, you can reach out to your local school district and they can evaluate. And then also private practice is always an option. So for example, my clinic, we work with insurances and with the different school districts and what have you. So you can always contact us and we'll tell you if we see things that are concerning, any red flags, or if we feel comfortable kind of waiting and things to look for. So especially with a child who is around 1 to 2, we definitely want to be hearing some of those first words. So we hopefully by the time we're around 2, we're starting to combine 2 words. Sometimes we might still be around the 1-word mark. We want them to be able to follow simple directions. We want them to respond to their name. We want them to be able to point to things and engage with the other humans in their environment and vicinity. So those are kind of the things, especially with the little ones, that could sometimes be easily missed by parents.
I love that. Some great tips. So here on the Healing Her Within podcast, my signature question, what do you think your inner child will say about the life that you're living today?
I love this question so much, and I've been thinking about it. So I think my inner child, the word that always comes to mind is wow. When I think about her 20, 30 years ago, she wanted to be a secretary, which is
Oh,
totally fine,
yeah.
totally fine. I love a good office supply. So, um, but I didn't know what was possible. I have a great family, but no, I'm the first one to go to college. So really, I didn't know what was possible. So I think my inner child would just be really excited, all the cool experiences that I've had, all of the dreams that I have, all of the families that I've been able to help, and all of the things that are kind of in the works. I think she'd be pretty impressed and
I love
excited.
that. That's awesome. That's amazing. And what's coming up in your business was something big that you want to, leave us with before we ask you for your contact information.
Absolutely. With the Empowered Parent Network, we are currently on the wait list, but the next round, the next cohort will be starting April 6th. So we have limited seats. I really like to keep it limited to about 10, 15 families just so we can keep it nice and intimate. But that will be beginning April 6th. We'll be opening enrollment next Monday. So I'm really, really excited for that. And then the business just continues to grow. So I'm excited to continue to add to the team, continue to welcome new families in. It's been a great year so far.
I love that. And where can our audience and listeners connect with you, learn more about you, and connect with you on your practice?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you are interested in anything speech related, you can go right to my website. It's www.olivespeechtherapy.org. You can also follow us on Instagram. We have lots of great tips and tricks for families, lots of practical activities, and that's at olive_speech. health_language_therapy. That's a mouthful. And then if you're a parent looking for some extra support, you can always visit our website, empoweredparentnetwork.org. And there you can learn more about we call it the Advocacy Accelerator. So that next cohort that is opening up, or learn more about advocacy in general. Or you can also visit our Instagram. It's at parenthood.unscripted.
I love that. And I'll make sure to capture all of that on our show notes for our listeners. Any last parting words?
No, other than I'm just so grateful that you have this space for all of these wonderful people to be able to learn and hear about all of the amazing women in our community. And I'm so grateful to be a part of that. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please leave us a 5-star review and share with a friend or two. If you aren't already following us on social media, please connect with me on LinkedIn at Maryann Rivera-Dannert or visit our website, MaryanNRivera-Dannert.com. I will catch you next week with a brand new episode, and remember that you are a priority and you matter. And one last thing. This is a disclaimer. The information shared in this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only, and it's not a substitute for professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. I am not a licensed therapist or counselor. If you're dealing with mental health or emotional challenges, please seek support from a qualified professional or a licensed counselor. Have a beautiful day.